Rain slid down the windows of the quiet city like tears. It was just past 6 in the morning, and most people were still tucked in their warm beds. But Officer Julia Reyes was already on patrol, her boots splashing through puddles on the sidewalk. Her radio crackled with background noise, but the streets were mostly still. She walked past a small coffee shop on the corner of Main and Ridge. The owner had called in again, third time this week. Someone was sleeping near the entrance, making customers uncomfortable. Julia sighed. Another complaint. Another cold morning. When she reached the shop, she saw him. A man, wrapped in a thin coat, sat slouched beneath the overhang. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't asleep. He sat still, too still. No sign of a blanket, no bag, no cart like most of the others she'd seen around. "Hey," she said firmly. "You can't stay here." The man opened his eyes slowly. They were gray, quiet, like he'd seen too much and didn't want to see more. He didn't speak. "You need to move along," she repeated. "Store open soon. You're blocking the door." Still no reply, just a small nod. He pushed himself up with slow, stiff movements. Julia watched him closely. His coat looked worn but clean. His beard was short. His boots were laced tight. He didn't smell like the street. Something about him felt wrong. Not in a dangerous way, just out of place, like he didn't belong here. Sitting in the rain, with nowhere to go. Julia's hand rested lightly near her belt. Her eyes narrowed. She'd dealt with dozens of homeless people in this city, but something about this man wasn't normal, and she was about to find out why. Officer Reyes stepped closer, her boots crunching lightly on broken leaves near the sidewalk. "What's your name?" she asked. The man glanced at her, quiet again. After a pause, he said, "James." His voice was rough but calm. "Last name?" He hesitated. "Donovan." "No, He shook his head. "Lost it." Julia narrowed her eyes. "You're not in trouble. I just need to confirm who you are." James said nothing more. His stillness was starting to bother her. Not because he was threatening. He wasn't. He just seemed too calm, like he'd already accepted something long before she arrived. "Turn around," she said, reaching for her handcuffs. "Just for now, until we sort this out." He didn't argue. He didn't run. He turned slowly and placed his hands behind his back. As Julia cuffed him, she felt a strange stiffness in his arms, like old injuries that never healed right. She started patting down his coat, checking for anything dangerous or illegal. Her fingers brushed against something in his inner pocket, small and stiff like a badge or patch. She pulled it out. It was an old, faded military patch, the kind worn on a soldier's uniform. It showed a symbol she didn't recognize, and the stitching was coming undone. But beneath the patch, barely visible, were tiny silver stars embroidered into the corner. Julia paused, holding the patch in her gloved hand. "You were in the military?" she asked. James didn't answer. The rain picked up, tapping harder on the shop's awning above them. Julia stared at him for a long moment. She'd expected resistance. She'd expected shouting or maybe begging. She hadn't expected this. A quiet man, with a soldier's posture. A homeless man, with the eyes of someone who had seen war. She led him to her patrol car. He walked without complaint, the patch still gripped in her hand. Julia didn't know what was going on yet, but her gut told her this wasn't just another arrest. This man wasn't just anyone. And very soon, she was going to find out why. The police station was warm and dry, a sharp contrast to the cold rain outside. Officer Julia Reyes led James Donovan through the back hallway, past rows of desks and tired officers sipping bad coffee. She kept glancing at him, still quiet, still calm. It was like he wasn't even present, just moving through the motions. They reached the booking desk. A rookie officer named Brent sat behind the computer, chewing gum like it was his job. He looked up and grinned. "Another early riser," Brent joked, eyeing James. "Let me guess, loitering, resisting, or both." Julia didn't smile. "Found him outside Hilltop Cafe. No idea." Gave his name as James Donovan. Brent started typing. "All right, let's run it." The computer hummed. Julia stood beside James, still holding the patch. She turned it over in her hand again. The threadwork was detailed. Real. This wasn't some fake patch from a military surplus store. Brent's face shifted. He squinted at the screen. Weird, he muttered. What? Julia asked. Systems freezing. This guy's name pulled something, but then the whole page crashed. That never happens. Julia stepped closer. Try it again. Brent refreshed the page and retyped the name. James Donovan. This time, a picture loaded for half a second, just long enough for Julia to see it was him. But it wasn't a mugshot. It was a younger James, clean-shaven, uniformed, standing beside a row of soldiers. Then the screen went white. Server error. It read. Before Julia could speak, a voice came from behind them. Did you say James Donovan? They turned. Detective Miller stood a few feet away, holding a coffee cup that had gone cold in his hand. He was in his 50s, heavy-set, with eyes that had seen more than most. Yeah, Julia said. You know him. Miller stepped closer, his face pale. I thought he was dead. Julia blinked. Excuse me? James Donovan, Miller repeated. Silver Star recipient. One of the most decorated combat medics in the Middle East. He saved lives in the field. Dozens. Maybe more. Brent leaned back in his chair. No way that's the same guy. It is, Miller said, his voice lower. I saw him speak at a ceremony once. Then, he disappeared. Years ago, no one ever found out what happened. Julia turned to look at James, still standing silently between them, hands cuffed at his sides, eyes down. He hadn't said a word, not during the ride, not now, but the mystery around him had just gotten deeper. Who was this man really, and what had driven a hero to the street? Detective Miller set his coffee aside. His hands were shaking. He hadn't expected to hear the name James Donovan again, especially not in handcuffs. Uncuff him, he said to Julia. She hesitated. He hasn't. I said uncuff him. Julia obeyed. The metal clicked softly as she removed the cuffs. James didn't flinch. He just rubbed his wrist gently, like he was used to pain, but not restraint. Miller stepped in front of him. Do you remember me? James looked up slowly. There was no surprise on his face, just a small nod. I saw you at the Valor Hall ceremony, Miller said, his voice quiet. You carried a soldier 2 miles under fire, saved his life with your bare hands. Then you vanished. What happened to you? James looked down again. I came home, he said. That's all. Julia watched closely. His voice was stronger now, but still tired. Every word seemed like it carried years of weight. You didn't just come home, Miller said. You disappeared. The army called it non-contact discharge. People said you went off the grid. Why? James took a long breath. After the war, I tried to live normal, got a job, a small apartment, but the noise didn't stop. The dreams didn't stop. Every time I walked past a loud car, I hit the ground like someone was shooting at me. Julia's heart tightened. James continued. My wife left, said I wasn't the same man. She was right. I wasn't. He looked around the station like it was a museum he didn't belong in. I tried therapy. They gave me pills that made me feel numb. I tried working, got fired for yelling at a copier that made a clicking noise. After a while, I stopped trying. Why didn't you ask for help? Julia asked gently. James looked at her. You think anyone listens to a broken soldier with no uniform left? The room was silent. I didn't want to be found, he said. I didn't want to meddle. I just wanted to forget. Miller nodded slowly. But we never forgot you. James gave the faintest smile. Guess that's the problem. Julia stood still, holding the patch he'd carried for who knows how long. She realized now it wasn't just cloth. It was the last piece of identity he had left. You could have said something out there, she whispered. I didn't want pity, James replied. I wanted peace. Another long silence filled the room. Miller finally said, You're not under arrest. You're coming with me. There's a place that helps vets like you. Quiet. Clean. No lectures. James looked unsure. Please, Miller added. James nodded once. Julia watched as the two men walked out of the booking area together. No cuffs, no judgment. Just quiet understanding. She stood there for a long time, the patch still in her hand. This wasn't what she thought it would be when the call came in. This wasn't just about a man loitering outside a coffee shop. This was about a war hero forgotten by the country he served, and maybe, just maybe, finding his way back. Detective Miller drove James Donovan across town to a quiet place, an old brick building that didn't look like much from the outside, but inside it was clean and warm. A small group of veterans sat at tables, some playing cards, some just sitting together in silence. Julia joined them after her shift. She couldn't stop thinking about James, and Miller had invited her to see for herself. They sat in a small room with soft lighting, and no uniforms on the walls. Nothing loud, nothing sharp, just space. James sipped from a paper cup of coffee. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was calm. "I was a combat medic," he said. "First in, last out. That was the rule." He didn't look at them as he spoke, just at the wall, like the memories were playing on a screen only he could see. "One day, we were sent on a rescue. A squad got hit hard. IAD, then small arms fire. We ran in blind, no cover. I patched up 6 guys under fire, carried one on my back for over a mile, got everyone out, except 2. Julia leaned forward. "One of them was my best friend. He bled out before I got there. The other was just 19. James's voice cracked, but he kept going. "After that I got a silver star, but all I remember is the blood, the screaming, and the quiet that came after." He paused, fingers wrapped tightly around the coffee cup. "When I came home, there were parades. People said thank you for your service, but no one wanted to hear about what I saw, about what I lost." Miller nodded slowly. "I know that silence. I tried to live normal, got a job fixing air conditioners. Every time something hissed or popped, I ducked like it was a rocket. People laughed at me. Boss told me I was scaring the customers." He looked down. "Eventually I stopped sleeping indoors, felt safer outside. No walls to close in, no dreams that way." Julia felt a lump in her throat. This man hadn't chosen the street he'd escaped to, because no one gave him another place to go. "I didn't want to die," James said, "but I didn't know how to live either." There was nothing dramatic about the way he said it, no anger, just tired honesty. Miller put a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, you hear me?" "You're not." James nodded once. It wasn't much, but it was something, a start. Julia sat quietly, the patch still tucked in her coat pocket. She realized now, he hadn't kept it as a reminder of who he was, he kept it to remember who he used to. But maybe now, that didn't have to be the end of the story. The next day, Julia sat at her desk, scrolling through her phone during a break. She didn't expect to see his face, but there he was, James Donovan, younger, in uniform, standing proudly beside a flag. The post was from a local reporter who had caught wind of his story. "Decorated war hero, found homeless. Why did we forget him?" The headline hit hard. Within hours, it had thousands of shares. People were shocked, angry, saddened. Some said it was a disgrace, others called for action. Julia wasn't sure how the news got out. Maybe Miller had said something, or maybe someone at the station talked, but the story was everywhere now. Calls flooded the precinct. Veterans groups wanted to help. A senator posted that she would personally see to it Mr. Donovan received proper support. Donations poured into the center where James was staying. Julia scrolled through the comments. "He deserved better. This country talks about heroes but forgets them when the uniform's gone. Shame on us." At first Julia felt hope. Maybe the attention would bring change. But then she thought about James, how quiet he was, how much he hated being the center of anything. She drove to the center that afternoon. James was outside, sitting on a bench, under a tree. He looked up when he saw. "They know now," she said softly. He gave a small nod. "I figured. How do you feel about it?" He shrugged. "It's loud again." Julia sat beside him. The air was cool, but the sun peeked through the clouds. The world felt a little lighter than it had a few days ago. "You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to," she said. "I know." They sat in silence for a while. James didn't smile, but he didn't seem quite as heavy either. "They're offering me a place," he finally said. "Small house, just mine." "That's good. I might try it." See if I remember how to live with walls again. Julia smiled gently. You won't have to do it alone. For the first time, James looked like he believed it. 3 weeks later, the air felt warmer. Spring had started to push winter away, and sunlight spilled through the clouds like a prom. Officer Julia Reyes pulled into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. The houses were small but neat, with trimmed grass and flower beds just starting to bloom. She parked in front of a pale blue house with white shutters. There was a flagpole in the yard. No flag yet, just space, just peace. James Donovan stood on the porch, a hammer in one hand and a wooden wind chime in the other. You're early, he said when Julia walked up. You're wearing clean clothes, she said back, teasing softly. He chuckled. It wasn't loud, but it was real. Inside, the house was simple. A small kitchen, a chair by the window, a shelf with only a few things. Some books, a folded blanket, and on the top shelf, carefully placed in a small frame, was the old military patch. He saw her eyes land on it. I thought about throwing it out, he admitted. Too many memories. But you didn't. I guess I'm not ready to forget, just ready to stop hiding. Julia nodded. You look better, stronger. I sleep now, James said. Not every night, but enough. A knock came at the door. It was a man from the Veterans Center, holding papers for James to sign. Official support, medical services, a therapist who was also a former soldier. All of it had been set up quietly. No press, no fanfare. James signed the forms, slowly, like every stroke was a step forward. As the man left, Julia stood. You'll be okay? She asked. I think so, he said. Then he paused. Thanks for not walking away that day. She smiled. You made it hard. They stood in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full, a begin. As Julia turned to leave, James spoke once more. Tell them, not all lost people are broken, he said. Some of us are just waiting to be seen. She nodded, the words sinking deep, and as she drove away, the wind picked up, spinning the new wind chime on James's porch. The soft notes filled the air, like the sound of something long buried finally breathing again. Officer Julia Reyes sat at her desk, the day's shift long over. The station buzzed with the usual noise, but her mind was elsewhere, in that quiet house, with the pale blue paint, and the man who had once been invisible to the world. She opened her locker and reached inside. There, folded neatly in the corner, was the military patch she'd taken from James Donovan. The thread was worn, frayed at the edges, yet it still held a strange weight, as if it carried the stories of wars fought and lives saved. Julia ran her fingers over it, the fabric smooth despite the wear. She had kept it, not because of the arrest or the headlines. She kept it because in the end, James had taught her something she hadn't expected to learn. Heroes didn't always wear uniforms anymore. She thought back to that day, the way James had walked silently through the station, the way his eyes never seemed to look for pity, just peace. She thought of the way he had carried the weight of a life that had been too much for him to carry alone. Julia didn't have all the answers. She couldn't fix what had happened to him, but she had learned that sometimes, it wasn't about fixing, it was about seeing. As she closed her locker, Julia stood, her fingers brushing the patch one last time. Sometimes, the ones we overlook are the ones who saved us all. And with that, she left the station, the weight of the patch in her mind, a quiet reminder of what truly mattered. If you were moved by James Donovan's story and the lesson that sometimes the heroes we overlook are the ones who save us all, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the strength we often miss in others. Your support helps us continue telling these important stories.